It is the year 2003. Moishe is an Israeli Jew, Mohammed, a Palestinian Arab. In a freewheeling, no-holds-barred discussion, sparks fly as both men hurl charges and countercharges at each other, each blaming the other side for the Arab-Israeli conflict. Although both men often frame compelling arguments, neither is willing to make concessions. Can their political differences ever be resolved? Can the chasm that separates them ever be bridged? Does peace have a chance? Or is their debate a mere smokescreen that conceals deeper, more painful, and profoundly personal resentments that form a web of mutual hate?
Hello, Moishe.
Hello, Mohammed.
So what's new in the news?
Same old stuff. War, crime, sex, sports, corruption, politics. What do you read?
Same thing, except of course, I'm reading it in Arabic.
Obviously, I'm not ignorant.
I didn't say you were.
So why did you find it necessary to point out what is obvious to me?
Please, let's not fight.
You're saying you don't want to fight an Arab who doesn't want to fight a Jew? Amazing.
You think that all Arabs want to fight?
From what I see on TV and read in the papers, it's hard for me to think otherwise.
Your attitude doesn't surprise me. The news is slanted and biased against the Arabs. We Arabs are no more prone to violence than anyone else.
Really? I don't believe it.
And you've closed your mind to the truth and have decided to believe all the lies. But what about the Israelis? Shooting innocent Palestinians and tearing down their homes?
They're just trying to defend themselves against Arab violence.
You mean they're trying to suppress legitimate Arab rage and anger?
I know where this discussion is heading,
That's right. It's heading right in that direction.
which is about your favorite topic, or should I say obsession, trashing Israel.
I don't think Israel is trash. And when you say Israel, you actually mean Palestine.
No, I actually mean Israel.
It's amazing how stubborn you people are.
And it's shocking how intolerant you people are. The state of Israel is a fact you Arabs have to come to accept once and for all.
You mean accepting it on your terms?
No, rather on the terms of the 1947 UN resolution, which partitioned Palestine into two separate states.
The partition.
That's right.
That 1947 UN vote was a travesty.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. The voting was stacked against the Arabs, who were forced to accept that what amounted to a U.S. dictate under the guise of a UN resolution.
Not true. The UN vote was an act of justice that the Arabs ostensibly have refused to accept.
Justice, perhaps, for the Jews. Injustice for the Arabs.
After World War II, something had to be done to help the Jews.
Granted, but why at the expense of the Arabs?
Nobody took anything from the Arabs.
You took our land.
We purchased the land.
We were forced to sell.
Nobody forced the Arabs to do anything.
Then why did so many Palestinians become refugees?
They chose to leave.
They had to leave. How could any Arab be expected to live in a Jewish state?
You managed to do it. You never left. In fact, legally, you are an Israeli.
I'm a Palestinian, not an Israeli.
No, you are an Israeli who happens to be Arab.
Cut the crap! I can't stand it anymore.
Who the hell are you?
I'm the baboon.
What kind of name is that?
A name that perfectly describes who I am. When I hear phonies like you two guys talking political crap, I get agitated and excited and start jumping up and down, making lots of noise just like a baboon. Your political posturing makes me mad and sick. All you're doing is using the Mideast crisis to listen to yourselves talk, not to solve problems. So cut the bullshit and let's get down to brass tacks. Now, what's griping the both of you guys? Come on, Mohammed. Tell Moishe the real reason you're so pissed off at him.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Sure you know. You just don't want to admit it.
No, I really don't know.
Listen, I've done some checking up on you, so let me help refresh your memory. Remember what happened in 1948 when Israel took over?
Kind of.
Kind of, you say? How could you ever forget it? Moishe came marching onto your land and gave you 10 minutes to leave. Remember that now?
Wait a minute. I never marched onto anyone's land.
What are you talking about? You Israelis came in like gangbusters and told every Palestinian you could find that they got to leave or else.
That's right. That's what happened. You had some nerve marching onto my land like that. You broke into my home and in front of my wife, threatened to kill me if I didn't leave. My wife almost died.
That's not true.
Not true, you say. Weren't you a soldier in the Israeli army in 1948?
I was, but I never forced my way onto anyone's land.
You're a damn no-good liar. I remember it like it happened yesterday. Boy, you were like stormtroopers. You barged right into my home, terrorized my family, and told me to get the hell out. Because of you, my entire family had to flee, and we had to leave behind everything except the clothes on our back. What a disaster. Who are you to do this to me and to my family? I want my home. We demand the right to return to our home. Get off my land!
Look, I have no idea what you're talking about. You must be confusing me with someone else.
No confusion. I'm certain it was you. You had a whole company of soldiers with you, 50 of you against one unarmed Palestinian who never did you any harm. Why did you have to come after me? What did I ever do to you? Give me back my land.
Now both of you guys are talking, having some real down-to-earth communication. Don't you think so, Moishe?
I don't know what to think.
Oh, let me help you recollect. According to your Army discharge papers, which I read, you served in the Israeli Army from 1947 through 1971 and retired with the rank of Major. Also, according to this document, by the way, I have an excellent memory, you were awarded a medal for valor during operations to clear out all Palestinians in the Galilee.
That's where I live. You see, it was you who threw me off my land.
That paperwork doesn't prove anything.
And you received a medal of valor? For what? For fighting unarmed citizens like me and my family? Did my wife and children pose a threat to you?
Maybe not to me personally, but your people did.
Aha. So you admit it was you who barged into my house?
I haven't admitted to any such thing.
You have a lot of explaining to do, not just to me, but to the entire world. I was born in Palestine, which was then renamed Israel when I was a boy.
Same with me. Yet I'm an Israeli, not a Palestinian. Why can't you call yourself an Israeli also?
Because Palestine is our land, not yours, and you took it from us by force.
It was given to us by the United Nations.
By a vote that was stacked against the entire Arab world.
And before that, it was under British mandate.
The British merely were caretakers who should have relinquished control of Palestine to the Arabs.
Not so. In 1917, the British promised the Jews a homeland.
You're talking about the Balfour Declaration, right?
That's right.
The Balfour Declaration was an outrage.
The Balfour Declaration was an act of justice.
The British had no right and no valid cause to promise the Jewish people anything.
They had that right, and they exercised that right.
What they did was just plain wrong. During World War I, the Arabs and the British fought as allies, but apparently that meant nothing to them.
The only reason why you fought with the British was to overthrow the Ottoman Empire. Under those circumstances, you could ally yourself with anyone who was willing to fight the Turks.
That's right. But we fought to gain our freedom, not to establish the framework for the founding of a Jewish state. To me, the Balfour Declaration marks the start of our present difficulties.
Then what were the British expected to do?
Grant us independence.
But it wasn't your country.
But we were living there in a region that was almost entirely Arab.
But Jews were living there also.
God, your political grandstanding's driving me crazy. Can't you guys level with each other? Poor Mohammed, thrown off his land, sounding like some kind of bereaved victim.
Well, I was the victim.
That is first-class garbage. You were one nasty bastard.
What do you mean?
Tell him why.
After I moved to your village, you tried to kill me.
Oh, no way.
I had just arrived from Europe. My entire family was gone. I was the sole survivor. There was no one else. I was on my own and nothing except the clothes on my back. I moved into that little hut that was right next to your farm, and the next thing I know, you were throwing rocks at me, even though I had done nothing to you. Is that how you Arabs normally treat your neighbors?
That wasn't you. You're imagining things.
No, it was me you were attacking. Anyway, after that kind of treatment, I knew I had to join the Israeli army in order to defend myself. After the horrible way I was treated in Europe, there was no way I was going to let anyone ever again treat me like that again. Not you, not anyone else.
You were trespassing.
No, that little hut was mine. I had purchased it from the local kibbutz.
That local kibbutz had no right selling my land.
It wasn't your land. It was Israeli land that the kibbutz had purchased fair and square.
That's crap. The land was mine.
You don't know what you're talking about. The kibbutz had offered you a lot of money and you refused to sell.
I had a right to refuse.
But you had no right to attack me.
I never attacked you.
I still have the scars from the rocks that you threw at me. You were a wild man. Worse than the Nazis.
I was wild? Who invited you to come to Palestine?
The Israeli government.
You mean your bogus government?
Listen, I'm not going to quibble with you. Maybe what I should do is kick your butt right now.
Come on and try.
Now we're talking.
Look, the Jews were a small minority.
Who wanted their own country.
Yes, in a place that was already inhabited by
You
Arabs.
keep talking in circles. The fact is that the British did promise the Jews their own homeland.
Yeah, a gratuitous promise made in a cynical attempt to maintain Western domination over the Arabs.
No.
It's the truth. Given how the Arabs aided the British during World War I, can you honestly say that the Balfour Declaration was fair, that it was just?
Palestine had been the Jewish homeland too.
2,000 years ago.
That's right. And although we were defeated and dispersed, we never disappeared as a people, and we preserved our link with our past.
While at the same time conveniently disregarding the present.
What were we supposed to do? Forget our past?
Not to forget your past, but to take into consideration present circumstances.
Like how the Arabs refused to coexist with us?
Were we expected to passively welcome a massive influx of Westerners into land settled for centuries by us?
It was our land before it was your land.
And your people lost it. So why should the Arabs have to give back something that was no longer yours, especially when your loss was not our responsibility? The Arabs did not evict you from Palestine, it was the Romans. So if you have any complaints, take it up with them.
Don't be so funny.
And don't you be so stupid.
And don't you be so nasty.
How am I being nasty? Because I disagree with you?
No. Because of your insensitivity to the needs of the Jewish people. We deserve a homeland too.
And you have your homeland, except it's at the expense of the Arabs who were dispossessed from their land.
That's not true. After World War I, Palestine became a British mandate, not an independent Arab state, and the British had the authority to create a Jewish homeland.
That's utter rubbish.
Nevertheless, those are the facts. So instead of fighting with the Jews, the Arabs should take their complaints to the British and the United Nations, which ratified the founding of the Jewish state.
Once again, I repeat, the Jewish state was forced upon the Arabs, and the UN vote was a front for maintaining Western influence in the region. And the Jews were convenient pawns in achieving this goal.
Your argument is ridiculous. Israel was founded not to further the goals of Western imperialism or to oppose the Arabs, but because it was the wish of the Jewish people to have their own independent state.
Don't be a fool. Did the Jews vote on this question?
Of course not. But the Zionist movement was deeply rooted in Jewish history.
That's right. And that's why it was convenient for the Jews to become pawns in the struggle between the East and West.
It's not true. What you're saying is pure speculation.
And given Europe's history of anti-Semitism, it should be no surprise that the West would have been more than happy to promote the creation of a Jewish state outside of Europe.
That's a lie. The Jewish people themselves were responsible for the founding of the Jewish state. In fact, after World War II, the British did everything they could to block Jewish immigration to Palestine.
But the fact is that the British still favored the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine.
What are you guys talking about now? The Jewish people, the British, Europe. Why can't you guys talk to each other?
We are talking.
No, you're not. You're talking at each other. All you're doing is hiding behind your words. Why don't you guys get down to brass tacks?
I thought that's what you were doing.
You two guys are the biggest dunces in the whole world, and that's saying a lot, especially in a world where real intelligence is a rare and often abused commodity.
What are you talking about?
Tell him why you're so pissed off at him!
I don't want to go there.
What's the matter? Too much of a wimp to tell the truth?
I'm not a wimp. It's just too painful.
You're just an inflated windbag who blows out noise just to relieve it.
Okay. You tried to rape my wife.
Huh?
What?
After you barged into my home, after my house, at the point of a gun, you grabbed my wife, ripped off her shawl, and tried to assault her.
This is too much.
You tried to make her do all kinds of disgusting things that I can't even mention. And all the time, forcing me to watch. It was horrible.
You are hallucinating.
Hallucinating, is he? Well, I remember having read somewhere in a newspaper article from January 23rd, 1949, and there was a very large photograph of Palestinian women being herded into a detention center led by Israeli Jews. It seemed to me like you guys were very busy running up the police.
I don't know what either one of you are talking about. The detaining of the Palestinian women was purely a defensive measure, and after screening, they were quickly released. Some of the most fanatical terrorists were women. Regarding your wife, I never touched her.
You philandering bastard. You're not man enough to have a woman of your own. So you had to try and molest another man's wife? I saw what I saw. It was you.
First, at the time I was married. Second, it wasn't me, I tell you. Indeed, during my entire service as an Israeli soldier, I never touched or abused a woman.
You treated us the same way the Nazis treated the Jews, except we refused to take it.
Actually, they turned over the entire matter to the United Nations.
They did that because they could no longer impose their will on the Arabs, which was to accept the creation of a Jewish state in Palestine.
But what were the Jews supposed to do after World War II?
That was a matter for the Jews and the countries of Europe to resolve.
And it was resolved through the founding of the State of Israel.
Exactly my point. Israel was founded with the support of the West, which was more than happy to accommodate the needs of the Jewish people in order to maintain Western domination in the Middle East.
Your distorted ideas ignore the fact that the Jews alone fought for the creation of Israel.
But you're forgetting that you did so with the help of the United Nations, which endorsed your cause and denied us our right to self-determination. And what good did it do? Over 50 years later, we're still fighting.
You mean the Jews are still defending themselves against the Arabs?
Don't put words into my mouth. My words are clear. The Jews and Arabs are at war. But don't you find that ironic? Two Semitic people fighting each other? Why should we be fighting? The Arabs never persecuted the Jews. In fact, even under the Ottoman Turks, the Jews were protected.
Then instead of opposing us, the Arabs should have welcomed us.
On what basis?
As friends, like King Faisal's son, Emir Faisal, advocated in 1919.
But you did not come as friends. The Jews came to Palestine as emissaries of the West. Our land was partitioned. Two states were set up, and the Jews were filled with joy, while the Arabs, denied control of their land, wept. Were we supposed to accept that?
The Jews needed a Jewish homeland.
Which was created without Arab consent. That was a gross injustice committed against the Arab people.
What about the injustices committed against the Jewish people?
Whose fault is that? Certainly not the Arabs.
It was this long history of persecution against the Jews that made it urgent that the Jews have their own homeland.
But it was persecution by the West, not by the Arabs.
And a bitter persecution it was, which made the creation of a Jewish state even more imperative.
But why was there such a rush to create a Jewish state after World War II? The Nazis were defeated and the Jews were liberated. So what made the need for a Jewish state so urgent?
The events that took place during the war proved that the Jews could guarantee their survival as a people only through the creation of their own independent state.
And the only way you had to achieve that goal was by stealing Arab land.
It was an Arab land.
And whose land was it?
The land was under the control of the British, who then relinquished their mandate to the United Nations, which then voted to partition Palestine into two separate states.
Yes, but who lived there?
Jews and Arabs.
Yes, but the Jews were latecomers and were a small minority of the total population. We Arabs were already living there, and instead of wanting to arrive at some kind of agreement with us over the issue of control of the land, the Jews unilaterally decided that they would create a Jewish state.
That's right. We wanted to create a Jewish state. Would you have allowed us to live and thrive in a Palestinian state?
Absolutely.
No way. You hate us. That's why the Jews needed their own state. You did not want to coexist with us.
We would have coexisted with the Jews, but the Jews wanted to create their own state at the expense of the Arabs. Under those circumstances, coexistence was not possible.
Not fair. The Arab world comprised over 22 countries and 200 million people. Given the immensity of your countries and the size of your population, why can't the Arabs tolerate the idea of Jews having a nation of their own?
Because Palestine was supposed to be an Arab state, not a Jewish state. And if the Arab people cave into the West over the issue of Palestine, then the entire Arab world will be reduced to little more than a bunch of colonies to be mercilessly exploited by the West for commercial gain.
So you're afraid that if Israel is allowed to exist, then the West will eventually impose their will over the entire Arab world?
That's right.
You're wrong. For much of your history, you never had control of your lands. For hundreds of years, you were under domination of the Ottoman Turks. Then after World War I, the French and the British had control of the region. Now there are 22 independent Arab states. To believe that the Jews pose some kind of threat to you is ridiculous. We just want to live in peace.
That's easy for you to say. But the facts are that in Palestine, we lived on the land, worked on the land, and comprised the vast majority of the inhabitants of the land. So it was an Arab land, which should have become an independent Palestinian state.
But the Arabs did get their own state.
Through a contrived partition, which was arbitrarily determined by the British without the consent of the Arabs.
But which was decided with the consent of the Jewish people.
Who were late arrivals and who had no legitimate claim to the land.
We did have a legitimate claim to the land. Why can't you accept that?
Because it's not true. We were there first. It was our land.
No way. It was under Turkish and British control. In fact, almost every country in the world recognizes the state of Israel, including Egypt and Jordan.
That still does not mitigate the situation of the Palestinian Arabs who have no country of their own.
Maybe if the Palestinians, Arabs, would stop attacking and tossing bombs at us, then something could be worked out.
What can be worked out? We want our land back.
Do you accept the right of the Jewish people to have their own homeland?
We do, but not on our land.
It's not your land!
It is our land!
You must accept the reality of the existence of a Jewish state.
Says you. Without the backing of the United States, Israel will cease to
And
exist.
if the Arabs will stop attacking the Jews, then maybe we can finally coexist.
Why should the Arabs accept the presence of a Jewish state?
Because peace is better than war, which only produces suffering.
We want peace too.
Terrorism and fanaticism are not the way to achieve your goal.
The Arabs deplore terrorism too. Well, we understand how our young people can resort to such extreme measures.
Well, I sure don't understand it. Suicide bombings, targeting innocent civilians, trumpeting terrorists as heroes and martyrs. To me, it seems that most Arabs condone these terrorist attacks. Who can forget the images of the Palestinians screaming with joy after the attack on the World Trade Center?
The Palestinians had nothing to do with that tragic event.
Their celebrating was on TV for the whole world to see.
But many other Arabs expressed their condolences for the losses suffered by the American people.
Yet many Arabs still call the U.S. the Great Satan and openly vow to drive the Jews into the sea.
And many Jews still refuse to recognize the right of the Palestinians to have their own independent state.
Untrue. Israel does not oppose the creation of a Palestinian state, but she doesn't want a Palestinian state that is intent on destroying the state of Israel.
In 1993, Yasser Arafat said that the PLO recognized the right of Israel to exist.
Then why are Arab terrorists still attacking the state of Israel?
Because the Jews still occupy lands in Palestinian territory.
But we need to maintain settlements for our own self-defense.
The Israelis still don't trust the Palestinians.
How can we? When your people keep preaching hatred and keep subjecting us to terrorist attacks.
If Israel were not so bullheaded, we would not have to resort to violence.
And if the Palestinians were not just two-faced frauds and so full of hatred, we'd be better able to trust you and your words.
What more did the Jews want from us? Huh? We acknowledge that Israel has a right to exist.
So then let Israel live in peace and stop your attacks on us.
And stop your occupation of the West
And
Bank.
stop your suicide bombings.
You mean the martyrs for a free and independent Palestinian state?
How can you call those maniacs martyrs?
Yes, they are martyrs. They're soldiers who are willing to die for a cause.
Soldiers? No way. They're vicious murderers.
To us, they're soldiers.
You condone their methods?
What to some is considered terror is to others legitimate means of struggle.
Are you saying that blowing oneself up with the purpose of killing innocent civilians is justifiable?
Under certain circumstances, yes.
It's outrageous!
Why are you so outraged? During World War II, your American and British friends dropped millions of tons of bombs on Germany, killing hundreds of thousands of civilians.
Yes, that happened. But while the Germans were being bombed, they knew exactly who was bombing them and why they were being bombed. And in addition, we were trying to stop a terrorist regime that started the war and was committing genocide.
Are you suggesting that in World War II, the mass killing of civilians was acceptable while now it's not?
I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that Nazi Germany was a terrorist regime and a menace to world peace that needed to be stopped at all costs, while Israel is a small country that wishes to live in peace with its neighbors.
Meanwhile, Israel is employing the same tactics against the Palestinian Arabs.
You mean we're indiscriminately targeting innocent civilians?
That's right. It happened in Lebanon and it happens every time the Israelis conduct an incursion into Palestinian camps.
What you're referring to are our self-defense operations to root out your terrorists.
You mean self-offense operations designed to terrorize the Palestinian people and keep the Palestinians down.
Not so. We're just trying to defend them ourselves. Israel has a right to secure borders.
And the Palestinian people have a right to have their own state, but Israel continues to block our national aspirations. Even the United States favors the creation of a Palestinian state.
But the U.S. insists on a Palestinian state whose leadership acknowledges once and for all that Israel has a right to exist and renounces the use of terror.
What are you talking about? Israel has to withdraw from Palestinian lands.
Will withdraw only when Palestinian leadership is committed to peace.
It's this Israeli stubbornness that is causing the conflict to continue.
That is garbage. The conflict is continuing because the Palestinian leadership still wants to destroy the state of Israel.
Israel still wants to oppress the Palestinian people.
And the Palestinian people still want to destroy the Jews.
No, we don't. We have no argument with the Jews, who are our Semitic brothers. Our argument is with your government that refuses to abide by agreements allowing for the creation of a Palestinian state.
In Oslo, Israel offered to withdraw from 97% of the West Bank and to relinquish control of the Gaza Strip. The response of the Palestinian leadership was to leave the negotiating table and renew the fighting.
Israel was intent on continuing a policy that was unacceptable to the Palestinian people. So there was nothing more to negotiate.
Before the 1967 war, the Palestinians occupied the West Bank. Why didn't the Palestinians found the state then?
Because we were still fighting to regain control of our entire country.
By that you mean the state of Israel?
That's correct. The state forced upon the entire Arab world in 1948.
And after 4 wars and countless acts of terrorism, you still haven't given up the fight.
That's right.
Given this ongoing hostility towards Israel, why should Israelis now believe that the Arabs have given up their wish to destroy the state of Israel?
We haven't. But maybe we will if Israel demonstrates a change in attitude, such as acknowledging the legitimacy of our grievances.
Yes, you have grievances, but we have grievances too. You Palestinians claim that you are victims, but it is the Jews who have been victims of discrimination, of hatred, of bigotry, of genocide, and we will not let that happen again.
God, I can't take it anymore. The verbal puke coming from both of you geniuses is almost too much to bear. You tried to rape Muhammad's wife, but what did Muhammad do to you?
I repeat, I never did that to his wife.
Like hell you did it, you lying son of a bitch. You're nothing but a pervert. Hey, if you want, I'll get you a tasty bagel with a nice hot hole. Maybe that will do you.
That's telling, Muhammad. But you're not exactly Mr. Goody Two-Shoes either, are you?
What do you mean?
What I mean is a certain incident from 1947 that involved you two guys.
I don't know what you're talking about.
But I do. I remember.
That's right, Moishe. The old memory bank is paying some interest.
In 1947, I had just arrived in Israel, and one night I was walking home after work on the kibbutz when 3 men attacked me and beat me and robbed me, and they ran away. It was awful. They were speaking Arabic and laughing like the whole thing was a big joke.
What did that have to do with me?
Everything. You were the guy who mugged me.
I did no such thing.
Oh, yes, it was you. Same voice.
Oh, that's ridiculous.
I'm certain it was you.
I don't care how certain you are, it wasn't me.
You filthy piece of scum. It was you. You were part of a gang that was attacking Jews.
Maybe I was, but that doesn't mean that was the gang that attacked you.
So there was more than one gang?
Maybe there was.
You targeted Jews like the Nazis did in Europe?
You people had no business moving in.
That means what? I deserve to be beaten up? I was to blame for my own victimization?
Those are your words, not mine.
Don't be coy with me, you dirty, twisted bastard. Or to shove my fist down your throat right now. How would you like that?
Tough talk coming from a wimp like you.
Oh, that's telling you, Mohammed.
You mean the wimp who you imagined did your wife?
Touche, Moishe.
But you are now treating us the same way that you've been treated. That's wrong. The Palestinian people never mistreated the Jewish people.
But if you could mistreat us, you would. The Palestinians don't want to coexist with the Jews. You want to destroy the Jewish state and drive the Jews out of the region. Your hatred of us is boundless.
We didn't start this fight. We didn't ask the Jews to come to Palestine. We didn't ask the British to partition our land. We didn't ask the United Nations to create the state of Israel. We didn't ask Israel to occupy the West Bank.
And the Jews did not ask to be systematically murdered. And the Jews did not ask to be expelled from their own country 2,000 years ago. And the Jews did not ask to be the target of every bigot, crackpot, and religious fanatic with an axe to grind.
And the Palestinians didn't ask the Jews to take over Arab land.
Arab land? No, Israeli land, Jewish land.
Back to square one. The talking is just a waste of time.
So you think negotiations now are useless?
Not useless, just fruitless, because Israel will not negotiate in good faith.
Won't negotiate in good faith? What do you expect from us when we are repeatedly attacked by suicide bombers? Is that supposed to encourage us to negotiate? It's either your side does not want to negotiate.
We do want to negotiate. We talked to Washington. We talked in Oslo. We brought our case to the United Nations. We have appealed to the world for justice. And what has been that result? Nothing. Israel is still blocking the creation of an independent Palestinian state. For a while, we thought there was a chance of arriving at an agreement with Rabin. But when Rabin was assassinated, we really began losing hope.
The assassination of Yitzhak Rabin was a tragedy.
But it was more than a tragedy. It called into question Israel's willingness to abide by the terms of the Camp David Accord, in which both the PLO and Israel accepted each other's right to exist.
We were, and still are, committed to abiding by the terms of the Camp David Accord. However, we question the willingness of the Palestinians to do the same.
You have no grounds for feeling that way.
Yes, we do. Look what happened after Israel gave up control of the Gaza and the West Bank. Instead of peace, Israel became a target for terror attacks, while the PLO did nothing to stop it.
That was because Israel refused to give up control of the land. We conceded that Israel has a right to exist. What more do you want?
Assurances that the Palestinians will stop attacking the Israeli people.
We gave you those assurances, but apparently you don't believe us, which causes us to question whether Israel really wants to negotiate in good faith.
Your assurances are a step in the right direction. But the open hostility of the PLO and other Palestinian organizations toward Israel causes us to question whether you want to negotiate in good faith.
What do we have to gain by negotiating in bad faith?
Time to build up your forces to attack Israel again?
So you believe that while we're talking, we're preparing to fight?
That's right. You're fighting us now, aren't you?
Yes, we are, but because we're trying to enforce the terms of an agreement that you are refusing to abide by. And besides, if you don't trust us, then what's the point of negotiating in the first place?
To achieve peace. But we're at a disadvantage. Israel is a small country surrounded by many Arab countries. So we have to be extra careful, especially concerning your real intentions. And we don't want to make concessions that could bring about our own downfall.
If anyone is at a disadvantage in this conflict, it's the Palestinians. Not only do the Israelis have the unqualified support of the United States, They have their own government, their own military, and have the power to enter our homes at any time.
That's right, within the state of Israel,
Even in the West Bank.
even in the West Bank.
That's Palestinian
There is
territory.
no Palestinian state. So how can we be there, be Palestinian territory?
Don't taunt me. You know that the West Bank is under Palestinian control.
No, that is not the case. Palestinians live in that region have been granted a certain degree of local autonomy. That entire region is under Israeli control.
It's that kind of arrogance that provokes us to commit desperate acts.
The more you try to fight us, the worse you make it for yourselves. Furthermore, I'm not being arrogant. I'm just telling you the truth that you do not want to accept.
And the struggle must continue.
Struggle for what?
Our liberation.
But the more you keep fighting us, the worse you make it for your own people.
We're not making things worse for our people. Israel is to blame with your brutal incursions into our home. Maybe if you stop those incursions and return to the bargaining table, then you can gain the peace and security that you say you want.
We cannot negotiate with terrorists, and we have to respond when we are attacked.
But you're being attacked because the Israelis will not leave the area that they said they would leave.
And that's because the Palestinians still hate us, and so we have to maintain a presence amongst you as a defensive measure, and to prevent the possibility of further attacks.
The Palestinian people are willing to live in peaceful coexistence with the Jewish state. But is the Jewish state willing to treat us with the respect that we deserve?
We respect the Palestinians. The main obstacle to peace is not Israel's attitude towards the Palestinian people. Rather, it is your continued hostility towards us.
Hostility toward you? In 1993, after the Camp David Accord, Palestinians gave flowers to Israeli soldiers and shouted Shalom. We were happy and jubilant, and we wanted to share our joy with the Israeli people.
That attitude certainly has changed. Now you're sending suicide bombers screaming for our blood.
Because you continue to ignore and disparage our legitimate demands.
So that gives you cause to resort to such acts of terror?
We tried negotiations and they failed. So what do you expect us to do? We fight with the means available to
Which
us,
includes suicide bombers?
if need be.
It is a tactic that will not succeed.
It's already succeeding. You don't know when or where the next attack will occur.
You're wrong. We will search out and punish all who protect those maniacs.
Such talk is pure exaggeration. No matter how harshly you may retaliate, you will never prevent us from attacking.
Once again, the Jews are under attack.
Wait a minute. We're the victims, not you.
No, we're the victims. You're attacking us in just the latest episode.